Step inside Fort Hamilton Distillery, located in the heart of Brooklyn, New York, where tradition, craftsmanship, and bold spirit converge. Founded by Alex Clark and Amy Grindeland, Fort Hamilton is on a mission to revive America's original whiskey style, New York Rye. With a deep respect for heritage and passion for quality, every bottle produced here reflects a meticulous approach to small batch distilling. Join Alex and Amy as they take us behind the scenes of Fort Hamilton Distillery and share what it means to build a modern legacy rooted in American whiskey history. I'm James Webster, and this is Owners and Operators. Maybe you guys we could just start with how do we get involved with distilling, in the distillery business?
I started working at one of Sasha's bars, Eastside Company, in 2005, 6, something like that. He taught me how to make these drinks. And what was interesting is that a lot of these drinks relied on rye whiskey as a base. And yet rye whiskey was very difficult to procure in America. It had fallen out of fashion heavily and was barely made anymore in America. And, it seemed odd to me that you could have this incredible culture and yet the kind of the cornerstone of it wasn't available anymore. One of the biggest problems with starting a whiskey distillery from scratch is you have this giant time lag between your production and your sale, because it's an aged product. And the longer it ages, to an extent, the better it tastes.
Sure.
Right?
Can't start pumping out right away day one.
Right. I mean, you can sell unaged whiskey, White Lightning, moonshine, right? But at the end of the day, you really want it to be aged in a barrel for several years before you sell it. So to be competitive with distillers who have huge inventories of barrels laid down years in advance is very tricky. And it's one of the reasons that it's a super risky business.
Is it generally 5-6 years or so?
It depends. There's a lot of ways to answer that question. Whiskeys are around the world are unique due to their geography, due to the recipes that they're made with, and due to the local laws governing them. In America, local laws determine that every bourbon or rye whiskey has to be aged in a brand new, heavily charred oak container.
Can't reuse?
No, not really. Not if you're making it from scratch, it has to be a brand new container. Can you change the container halfway through the aging process? Yes, you can. But to get it going, it has to be a brand new container. Consequently, you leave it in that container for a reasonable amount of time because you want it to get the advantage that container offers, which is color and flavor. Because of that, the timing of the perfect whiskey in America is different to the timing of a perfect whiskey in Scotland, for example.
Makes sense.
Also, you have climatic differences.
Sure.
Scotland's pretty grey and dull and drizzly and not particularly warm, whereas America has pretty violent temperature swings over the course of a year.
Yep.
So you put violent temperature swings along with brand new barrels, and you end up with different kind of aging timing than you would get in Scotland, for example. So that's a long way to answer your question, but it depends is really the truth of it. Most people consider that most experts think that American whiskeys peak around 8 to 10 years. So yeah, this is a stave from actually one of these 30-gallon actually there's a 53 gallon barrel. But it's been burnt on the inside to a char number 3, some of which has fallen off in the aging process. But char 3, you can get different char levels depending on how long you burn the wood for. But heavily charred it must be, so that's why it's black. We choose to age most of our whiskies in char 3 barrels, which have been burnt for about 1 minute and 20 seconds.
Did this start as a hobby for you, or did you distilling itself? Because
No, it wasn't a hobby.
No?
It was a
Drinking was a hobby.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's a good one.
Sure. I was always interested in it, I suppose. I've always been interested in food and beverage. My dad would put me and my brother in his camper van and drive across Europe in the summers. And looking back, I think that had an influence on me. You know, I think my first glass of wine was in Sancerre when I was young. Too young, probably.
Definitely for the States.
Yeah, sure. And, you know, we would go to Saint Malo, and I remember having like crazy meals and getting exposed to interesting flavors, and then I think that sort of led to me working in food and beverage and bartending, and then working in fine dining restaurants. So is it a hobby? Sure, I guess so.
What brings the most customers to you? Is it having the tasting room? Is it?
I mean, the tasting room is huge because it allows us to show off the brand in the ways that we think it should be shown.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Amy does a phenomenal job of running the tasting room and having events, which, you know, tours, which are super popular. And then we have the wholesale side of the business too, which I run as director of sales, and everything kind of works together, I suppose, is the truth of it, right? Like, we would be nowhere without that tasting room, because
It's really key with the business.
Key as a revenue provider in a business where the wholesale side of the business is trying to not sell product. Like, that tasting room has saved our bacon for a few years.
Sure, you can bring in some revenue.
That brings in the
Yes,
revenue
that
too.
brings cash flow into the business.
Yep.
When
But
we're
liquid to lips out in the market as well, though, being in a liquor store. And I remember when we first started doing tastings and asking people to taste a rye, because we had one product. And they were like, most people didn't know what rye was. And maybe their experience with rye was harsh, because a lot of ryes out there aren't great.
Yeah.
You know, that can be more like a rocket fuel or a burning sensation. So to offer someone this rye that's very balanced, and it has that rye, that spicy, peppery flavor, but also the sweetness that comes as you taste it, was surprising. So one, just getting them to take your cup, trying it, and then the reaction was like, wow, I didn't realize I was a rye drinker.
Gotta get, and there's one way to do that is to get them in the tasting room. Right?
Yeah,
That's right.
So offering them that taste, then offering them an experience to come in and have a cocktail made with the products, going on a tour.
But we do, yeah, we have a lot of angles that we cover. You have to have all the plates spinning constantly. Sure. And it's also really complicated, right? So we've got like all these different parts of the business that most people, one of those parts would be considered a business to most other people, like running a bar.
I'm just going out on an assumption here that 6 years in business is still rather young for a distillery of rye whiskey.
9 years in business.
9 years in business.
So
that's
the
probably
whiskey
still-
that we're selling now is 6 years old. The first
Gotcha.
3 years worth of production we pretty much sold. Now we're into year 4
Gotcha.
production.
Even 9,
Yeah.
I'd still say.
Oh yeah.
It
We're
is.
still-
The
Once
adolescent
you understand
age
the
of a
business.
business.
If you're making whiskey from scratch, then yes, 9 years is young.
Yep.
If you're sourcing whiskey from someone else that's already aged, then you're probably in middle age at that point.
So what's next for Fort Hamilton? What's do you have something big on the agenda? Something?
Wait, we're doing something else? What's next? Well, we have maintained a pretty laser-like focus on building the brand in New York. And we certainly haven't hit the ceiling yet. I'm doing more work out in Long Island next month, as well as up in the capital region. So we're starting to get slightly outside of New York City, which is a huge market in itself. So we're going to be introducing Fort Hamilton to more of New York State in the next year or two. And naturally, after that, we will start thinking about which other states to tackle.
We're in 7 states right now, primarily New York.
We are
where
in
we do business.
7 states because it's quite frictionless, because our distributor is in our New York distributor is in those states. So without really lifting a finger, we're available in those states.
Makes sense.
But we don't really do much work in them currently. But we will increasingly start to think about which states to go in and how much effort to put in and how much ultimately money to spend in those states to get the Fort Hamilton story out there. We also have a healthy direct-to-consumer business right now through our website at forthamilton.com.
Right there.
You can do that. We don't ship directly because that would be illegal, but we work with a retailer that does. So unlike beer breweries and wineries who are allowed to ship direct, distilleries are not.
We're allowed
various
to
reasons.
direct to consumer in New York State, though.
In New York State,
They
right.
just passed a law this last year.
Right.
So
But
we can
In
do.
New York.
We're in New York. We're allowed to ship to New York.
Gotcha.
But as where the beer and wine, they're allowed to ship across the
pretty
nation.
much, yeah.
We haven't
but,
gotten there.
But we have a retailer that will ship outside of New York too. So that part of the business we will be growing out. We're continuing to grow out, and probably putting a bit more emphasis on that. I think in the next few months as well. So yeah, I think broadening our reach is what we're interested in doing, but doing it in a way that doesn't
Controlled.
bankrupt us.
Yeah, a controlled way.
Yeah, a controlled way, and I think.
And you also have to take the stock into consideration too, right? Like you said, you
That's exactly right.
can't go out right now to be in every DM of every social media account in the country, and then you have this influx of consumers that really want your product.
Right. So
Slow and steady wins.
slow and steady is right. I mean, and then just the sheer capital investment that you need to outlay to fulfill that sort of demand you're talking about tens of millions of dollars.
Wow.
Because you got the barrel itself, which is currently around $330 per barrel. Then the grain and the labor and the fermentation that goes into filling the
Costs money
barrel,
for
then
the
the
space.
storage of it, and then multiply that by thousands of barrels, and
Big investment.
that's part of the problem of the business. And then you hope that somebody wants to buy that barrel at the end of it, right? So that's also this huge risk. So we've tried to create this balanced portfolio, which then gives us a bit more autonomy. But at the end of the day, we do have to throttle the growth. Otherwise, it's either that or we have to spend $10 million building our barrel inventory, which is tricky.
Well, we were talking about doing a label here,
Yeah,
right?
let's get you on the bottle.
You guys want to get
Yeah.
going?
Yeah, we'd love to.
All right.
Thanks for joining us at Fort Hamilton Distillery. We hope you enjoyed getting a taste of the passion and purpose behind their craft. If you'd like to explore more local businesses and the people who power them, don't forget to subscribe. And if you or someone you know has a story worth sharing, leave a comment below or reach out to us. We'd love to connect. Thanks for tuning in, and we look forward to seeing you next time on Owners and Operators.